oftentimes when people are going through really specific issues within my clinical practice, to ask them to read a nonfiction book about grief and loss, or about divorce, or about, meeting the right person or relationships, sometimes it's just too painful. Sometimes they don't want to have to read a step-by-step of some of the things they may have done wrong or that they're trying to do, but it seems like they're never going to be able to get it done. And so one of the advantages of having a piece that has, some of the heavier kind of topics and issues that are woven inside of a fictional tale is it gives people a chance for reflection, and it gives them a chance to be able to think about it.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 274 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have an interview with Michelle Oucharek-Deo, a writer, a speaker, and art therapist who has dedicated herself to living her life on the sparkly side of the street. Now, Michelle and I talk about her fiction writing journey and how her time management philosophy of the 42-minute hour allowed her to lay the foundation to running two parallel careers, baking muffins for her son, planting her garden, and still staying sane. And that comes up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word about this episode's sponsor. This podcast is sponsored by Findaway Voices. Findaway Voices is a platform that offers you the ability to get your audiobooks out into the global market, reaching more than 43 library and retail markets. You have control with Findaway, including price promotions and ongoing merchandising. And as reported at blog.findawayvoices.com, multiple times a year, they reach out to authors with a call for merchandising entries. Now, these submissions fuel their merchandising efforts so that they can pitch more titles to their retail partners for great placement. Now, just remember, unlike ebooks, with audiobooks, you can have different prices on different platforms. So if you run a price discount promo on platform A, it does not have to be discounted on platform B like you get with ebooks. Now, if you're listening to this as the episode comes out on Friday, October 28th, 2022, you still have a few days to get your promotions in if you are a Findaway Voices author. I'll have a link to the blog post that has the link to the merchandising call for entries in the show notes over at starkreflections.ca. But they're looking for titles for 3 different promos. Great audiobooks at great prices, which is their Black Friday / Cyber Monday edition. And the promos are going to run from November 21st until December 7th. And so it's big discounts. And I have already submitted one of my books to that with my fingers crossed. It is the Fears and Frights bundle. And it is the, I'm stumbling over my words. Unlike Findaway Voices narrator, who would not stumble over their words. But it's a 2-book bundle in my Canadian Werewolf series. It's Fear and Longing in Los Angeles and Fright Night's Big City, because there's a major story arc that sort of contains those 2 full books. And so I regularly have that audiobook, because it's 2 books in one, at $24.99. And I'm going to drop it to below $5.99. I'm thinking $3.99, $4.99, something like that. I'll go with whatever they recommend. They just want it $5.99 or lower. But that's what they're looking for the one promo. And then they have Holiday Cozy Mysteries. Again, they're looking for books that are discounted down to $4.99 or lower. And that's going to run from December 12th to the 28th. And then they have great audiobooks at great prices, the Holiday Edition, and my mistake, that's the one I submitted to, not the Cyber Monday, Black Friday. And this is, again, $5.99 or lower, so the same idea, but these promo dates are December 19th through December 31st, so it's holiday time. And I chose that one because there's so much going on with Black Friday, and I know there's probably going to be people right after Christmas looking for stuff to load up and read, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I'm banking on for that one. And then there's a self-development sale, again, $5.99 or lower. Promo dates from December 30th to January 11th, and that's 2023. And so again, these are just some of the promos that they're doing, but you can always submit your own promos over at Findaway Voices. You go into the dashboard and you click over to promotional pricing, and you can actually see the various promotions. So right now, for example, I have the Fears and Frights box set over at $4.99 on Chirp. It's regular $24.99. I have This Time Around dropped down to 99 cents on Chirp and Spotify and Apple and Nook. I had to submit it 4 different times, once for each platform. I also have a bundle of Fears and Frights is $4.99 as well at Apple and at Nook and at Spotify, because why not? I want it to be fair. If you're listening to audiobooks on one platform over another, I'm going to do a promo on, so I have to do it 4 times, but then that way it's more fair for more readers. And it's just been great because you can set these at your own time. You can also apply for Chirp deals from BookBub account. I just applied for another BookBub, a Chirp deal, I should say, through BookBub, and I got rejected, and that's okay. I've gotten probably 13, 14, 15 rejections and a couple acceptances. So I'm not going to complain, because that's really helped me out a lot. And even in this, the sales that I've done, I'm just looking at my dashboard right now. And I've had sales of Bundle of Fears and Frights This Time Around. And again, those have sold on Chirp. I've sold Lover's Moon on Biblioteca, library platform, which is kind of cool. Again, This Time Around over on Chirp and Biblioteca, someone bought Bumps in the Night. It was a mini story collection of ghost stories. And one of the great things about doing these mini story collections, if they're like 15,000 words or 20,000 words, is it's 10,000 words per hour, roughly. So I only had to pay about an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes for that mini story collection, and I've already earned my money back on that. A lot easier to earn that back, especially through cost per checkout at the library system. But again, that's just one of the great features that you have when you work with Findaway Voices. And if you want to see how you can leverage Findaway Voices as an author, you can check them out over at starkreflections.ca/Findaway. So a funny thing happened on the way to this podcast. I was about to start my personal update by saying, yeah, I have all these great intentions of the things I need to get done, and I'm not getting them done. I'm scrambling and trying to keep my head above water with so many different things going on. And it's funny because I did have quite a bit of time today being Thursday, October 27th, but I still did not manage to get to the podcast until late in the day. I ended up doing other things, taking care of other small tasks and filling those cracks in odd ways. So what I'm sort of pre-reflecting on here is going back into this interview is taking Michelle up on her offer on my time management issues and seeing if there's something that I can do. So what I was going to do, and I haven't done it yet, is I actually talked to her, oh my God, was it last month or earlier than a month ago when I actually recorded this, and I haven't even gotten back to her asking to set up a session and asking if it's okay if I can record it for the awesome people who support this podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections. Don't worry, folks. I have not forgotten about you. I still love you, and I am still looking to make it up to you for missing out on a couple of those hangouts. I'll find ways to make sure you're getting your value, and I do appreciate your support over on that site. I am getting ready to gear up for Frightmare in the Falls, which is a horror conference in Niagara Falls, Ontario, which is about an hour and 40-minute drive from where I live. And I have an author table there. I have books that are self-published that I have. I have books that are traditionally published. I've ordered some books through a local indie bookstore, and I'm hoping that they're here soon so I can pick those up. I'm getting a discount off the retail price. Those are the traditionally published ones. But I have plenty of books, and Liz's daughter, Sarah, has been making awesome buttons, art buttons, She got some Sesame Street buttons too. She got some comic book buttons, some horror buttons, even some buttons branded with some of my stuff on it. Some of my wolf book covers and ghostly books and stuff like that. And even a couple planes, trains, and automobiles buttons. And that's just so we can have a lower price point there. So, my cheapest books are, I've got these mini story collections of chapbooks that are 60 to 100 pages. They can retail for $5 because the cost is maybe only $3 for them. It's a nice low price point at $5, but I have the buttons at $1 and $2. And part of the psychology of having really low priced items is once someone opens their wallet to buy something for $1, it's a little bit easier for that upsell. So I wanted to have the reason I had the $5 books are for the lower price point things. Then again, people like buttons and just having other options, having other interesting. I'm getting texts here, so I'm getting all distracted. I'm just going to leave this in because what the heck, right? But having other items that maybe people who are with the people who are reading are checking out is something that could be useful. I'm going to now pause this and see who is texting me repeatedly. Okay, managed to deal with the texts that were coming in. But I'm telling you about the Frightmare in the Falls because it's a big thing. I'm actually having to drive over there, stay overnight. Sarah's coming to help me. It's a full day on Saturday and it's going to be a full day Friday because I drive down there, then I set up, and then it runs till 9 o'clock at night, probably right 2:30 in the afternoon till 9 o'clock at night. There goes my texts again. I'm just going to ignore it for now so I can finish this intro. But that's Frightmare in the Falls. On other news, Julie Strauss and I have begun the outlining. Now, she's done way more outlining than I have, but we're using Plotter for the outlining, and we managed to circumvent a bit of a technical issue we were having with sharing it. She created a great plot outline and has outlined what was going to happen with Gail during the book, and now I have to get off my duff and outline what's going to happen with Michael, because we're both going to be writing that book in November. Now, before outlining, I had to go in and I had to write the prologue and I had to write chapter 1. Prologue from a third-person point of view, and chapter 1 from Michael's first-person point of view, because I needed to get into the world first before I could outline. It's kind of like I needed to sink myself in there. It reminds me of being French immersion in a way. When you're in Paris, when you're in a part of Montreal where very few people are speaking English, and you're immersed in the language, you pick it up a lot better. And I find the same thing when I immerse myself in the story, when I'm there and I sat down in Michael's apartment and I watched what happened when Michael answers the door and Ben and Iz come in and there's a confrontation between the three of them, and I just recorded what they did. And that was so much fun. So gearing up for that writing, also gearing up for some more promotions for Canadian Mounted as American Thanksgiving approaches. But I got a call from Leanne Cusack, who is the host of the afternoon program, the News at Noon program on CTV News in Ottawa. Now, Leanne also had hosted in the past a segment of CTV News that usually played in the 6 o'clock news, which is called The Lighter Side. And she featured the parody video that Liz and I did years ago, 2 years ago in 2020. She featured that parody video of Stuck in This House Here With You, based on the Steeler Wheels song. And then Liz and I did a sort of a K-Tel spin-off a few months later, which was just more parody songs about the pandemic. And Leanne called because she remembered I wrote horror stories and said, "Can you come on Monday?" So Monday, October 31st, Halloween, she's going to have me on. She's going to have me on the show for about a 8 to 10 minute segment. So a little segment before one commercial and then a little bit more after, sharing some ghost stories from Creepy Capital, one of my books published by Dun Dern, so Ottawa ghost stories. But she's also asked if I can share a few stories from across Canada to help them celebrate Halloween. And I'm so excited because, this is my time of year. But that's it for my personal update. Let's get right into the conversation that I had with Michelle Oucharek-Deo. Michelle, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
It's my absolute pleasure to be here with you today, Mark.
there's many things that I know we can talk about, but before we get into creativity and painting and writing and all the wonderful things we're going to talk about, can you let my listeners know a little bit about you, your background as a creative person, as a therapist, as a writer, all the things that make up Michelle?
Sure. I became an art therapist. It's now 28 years ago. So
28 years.
28 years I've been working in the field of creative arts and counseling and helping people of all ages. I've worked with people from the ages of 3 years old up into I think 103 was probably my oldest that I
Oh,
ever worked
wow.
with.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's been an amazing career, my whole world. And so, one of the things that I found in my life is that not only did I want to use the art and the art making as a piece of healing and being an opportunity to be able to offer that to people, but one of the pieces that was always in my heart was I started writing actually when I was just little. I recall a story about when must have been about 6 years old, and we were in the library at school, and we had made these little books up, and I can just remember being able to go on the shelf, and we were able to pull the books we wrote in our grade one class off the shelf, and I thought, ooh, that's what I want to do one day. I want to,
Really? Okay.
yeah, yeah. So, as I grew, I ended up doing, I got into the theater, and I started to write and direct shows when I was in high school, and that's where a lot of my energy went into. And so when I ended up going into university, I actually was a creative writing major when I went in, but I very quickly discovered that what their consideration of a creative writing major would be and what I wanted to write were two different things. And so what I found that I ended up doing was continuing to write a lot of scripts and plays and things like that. And then eventually my world led me to art therapy and counseling, but it wasn't until I guess I was in my mid-30s and I started thinking about doing some writing, like writing, and then I thought, well, I'll write something professional, and I'll write something about art therapy and grief and loss, because that's an area I specialize in, and working with people with developmental disabilities. And I started writing those materials, and I thought, oh, I live this every day. I want to write something more exciting, I guess it was. And so when I got into my 40s, I decided, so that people know, I'm 53, proud of it. I just turned 53 last week,
Oh,
and
happy birthday. I missed it. Now we're the same age now.
oh, fantastic. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. And so I made the choice just to start writing, I just wanted to write a fiction story. And so I thought, well, I'll dive in. And, I have to laugh that, after I finished the first novel and people started reading it, the first thing people said to me was, oh, you can really tell you're a counselor. And one of the reasons that came up was just that the main character, Maya, in my first book, The Girl in the Peach Tree, she's dealing with, some issues, some historical issues where she grew up in a household where her mom was clinically depressed. Her mom had suffered from postpartum depression and had never been treated properly, and so the postpartum then shifted over into a clinical depression. And so this character that I have, Maya, she's now, the oldest child out of two girls in this household, and now she takes on this role, throughout her life where she thinks, really that she has to stay happy and stay positive and try and figure out and be the best little girl that she can for everyone until she gets older. And that's kind of where the book starts, is the night before her wedding, and she has this massive panic attack, and she realizes that she doesn't love this man, she doesn't want to marry him, and now what is she going to do? And she's like, oh my gosh, what kind of life can I live now? And she starts to realize she has to become more accountable for the actions she's taking in her life. And so the story starts to unfold, and she ends up on a trip to Portugal, and she meets all these amazing women and becomes friends with them, and she ends up, of course, there's a romance that's there, but it's really focused on that self-discovery and really finding out who you are, and then coming to terms and being accountable then for your actions as an adult, and that you're no longer a child, and that no matter what happened in your adolescence or in your childhood, that you've got to to find a way to be able to address and deal with that trauma in some way, right? And so that's kind of where the book takes you. So it's a crossover genre of women's fiction and a little bit of women's contemporary romance. And so and then I'm just finishing the third book now, and it'll be coming out in February on February 7th, 2023, and that'll finish out the trilogy. So it's been a ride. It's been 10 years.
Well, I was going to ask, so Maya is the recurring character for all three books. It's her
Yes.
that you're focusing on?
Yes, yeah. So
But
Maya, and then her love interest are the person who becomes her support interest in this story is Cristiano, and he's a Portuguese flight attendant who he himself went through some challenges. And it's really funny because I mean this young man, his parents passed away when he was little, and so he's dealing with some of his own issues of grief and loss, and they get really triggered, when he meets someone and they want to be able to have a relationship, yet he has to do some of his own work. And so one of the crossovers is I wish that there was something called men's fiction too, like that we had some sort of thing that there's women's fiction and men's fiction, because I believe that men should have an opportunity to be able to evolve in the storyline and to be able to make changes to their character, where in some of the genres out there don't really allow for that kind of emotional and insightful change for male characters, but my books do.
I would argue that the original men's fiction might have been the James Bond type novels, but that the latest movies is the first time James Bond actually grew as a human, as a character, as opposed to being a cardboard cutout.
Yeah.
That's one of they made changes, like, oh, things happened to him. He had a past. He had a childhood. Anyways, so I'm fascinated. These sound like amazing books. So the first two are out, and the third one you're working on right now, the trilogy.
Yes, it just went to the proofreader like on Monday on my birthday. I was like, it's going to the proofreader today.
Excellent.
So it went off to the proofreader, and pre-sales will be up on October the 1st for
Oh,
the third. So the first book is The Girl in the Peach Tree.
yeah.
Second is Barefoot in the Dirt, and the third is Untangled Vines.
Oh,
And so, yeah, yeah,
sounds great.
yeah, and the series is Wine, Love, and Friendship. Is
Oh, hey,
the
see this. Oh,
is
this sounds awesome. I'm sure there's listeners who are like, ooh, let me get them all. So before we began interviewing, we were talking a little bit about the difference between incorporating these messages and this important. And you talked about people reading the book and saying, wow, that you can tell that you work with people and that you help them as a therapist, as opposed to have written this into a nonfiction book.
yes.
What's the benefit of putting it into like a fictional setting for people to enjoy?
Well, one of the things that I've seen, as far as benefits, is that oftentimes when people are going through really specific issues within my clinical practice, to ask them to read a nonfiction book about grief and loss, or about divorce, or about, meeting the right person, relationships, sometimes it's just too painful. Sometimes they don't want to have to read a step by step of some of the things they may have done wrong or that they're trying to do, but it seems like they're never going to be able to get it done. And so one of the advantages of having a piece that has, some of the heavier kind of topics and issues that are woven inside of a fictional tale is it gives people a chance for reflection, and it gives them a chance to be able to think about it. I remember a colleague of mine had borrowed, she bought a copy of my book when I first had them out, and she started reading it, and she came to me and she said, I can't, I read the first two chapters and I need to take a break. And I said, okay. I said, are you okay? And she said, it hit so close to home about the choices that I made in my own relationship that I need to wait before I read the next chapters and just to see. And so it was very interesting, watching her progress as she read through the book. And I had the privilege of walking with her through the storyline. And as she said, if I had read this book, she said, if I had picked this book up and read this book, she goes, I probably would have never married him. And so it was so emotionally, I guess, fulfilling for me in that one way to know that I've written a piece that has that kind of content for some people. I mean, on the other side, I had when I first wrote it, I had my 15-year-old son read the book. And he said to me, so the part that he got out of that whole storyline was that he's like, "Oh, that Dally character, she's a terrible friend, Mom." So, one of the things that I really was able to see was that, woven into the storyline, you can in a fictional piece really, you can include those heavier elements, and it really depends on what someone wants to take out of it and what they can take away from the story.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing. So let's talk a little bit about creative arts therapy. Let's talk a little bit about how does that, how does it feels like there's a perfect tie into the fiction. It's like, it's not going to be in your face. It's going to be something that comes as part of the story and the characters are real. Is the creative arts therapy very similar as opposed to just being this, blatant forced down on you approach?
Oh, you mean within the counseling field? Yeah, absolutely. Within the creative arts therapy field, you have different people who are doing art therapy, music therapy, dance therapy, drama therapy, and equine therapy. So there's all these different kinds of, of therapies that cross over. Also horticultural therapy. I'm also a horticultural therapist. I finished my program in that too. So I'm able to incorporate the art and the nature over into my work. it's
Wow, that's
it's
amazing. Wow.
it's a pretty awesome
For
job to
all
be able
seasons, right?
all seasons. I get to do art, I get to garden, I get to write. Having these crossover professions has really allowed me to be able to, to offer people so much more, both within my counseling, within the counseling field, and also out in my writing. But you asked the question about the creative arts therapy, and when you're diving into doing counseling in those fields, some people will say, well, art therapy. I can't tell you how many times in my career I've had people say, art therapy? What's that? so, so I mean, the
Michelle, art
best.
therapy, what's that?
Well, here's my thumbnail experience. Here's my thumbnail definition of it. So basically, art therapy is another way for people to express themselves when they are dealing with all different kinds of issues. So we use the art often as a bridge between the counselor, the art, and the client. So I mean, sometimes people assume that art therapy means, number one, that you don't talk. That's not true. That art therapists are trained as counselors to do the other work. Sometimes there isn't a lot of discussion. I mean, sometimes it's just that people are diving straight into the work. You can have someone who's dealing with like a physical issue. Like I was working with someone who had who was having back pain, and we were trying to figure out, well, how can we use the art and the art making to be able to help somebody to be able to relieve the pressure without having to take more medication, because they wanted to go off some of their meds. So we started working with plasticine, and I'm not sure for your listeners if they've worked with plasticine before. So what I do is I take tiny little pieces of plasticine, so I cut them up in all the different colors, and I put them in a tray. So if you can imagine, there's this tray, and it's got pink, red, blue, black, yellow, different shades of brown and green, and so you have this whole tray of these tiny little pieces, and then I can get a canvas board, and on the canvas board I get them to take the small pieces of plasticine and start squishing and moving the plasticine. So we're not only physically moving, we're getting them to be able to breathe, and I do breath control work, so I'm like, breathe out, and press. And so there are different ways. So that's one way where I can get someone physically involved in the art making. Sometimes I'll have somebody who's dealing with a grief and loss issue, and even just, we were talking earlier about pets and about the role that pets play in our lives. And I had a young person in my studio last year whose rabbit passed away, and so we ended up actually making a stepping stone, and we had like little tiny beads that went into the stepping stone, and he carved the name of his rabbit into the stepping stone, and so then the family, then we let it dry, and then he put it into the garden where he was going to, where they had put the rabbit. So those kind of things can be used as active tools to be able to help someone and find that bridge, through whatever emotional experience they're going through.
I love that. I love that because you're channeling emotion, you're channeling experience and feeling into something else. Almost you're making it tactile so you can look at it. Well, I love the plasticine. You can manipulate it, you can mold it rather than it being something that's caught back here and you can't
Yeah.
feel it properly, or I'm
So
not sure.
what I'm going to do right now for those of you who actually get to see this interview, I'm just going to hold up actually a
Okay.
piece that I did as an example of
Okay.
this is a plasticine piece. So if you
Is that
go
all
in,
plasticine on that?
it's all
Not.
plasticine.
It's not. It looks like acrylic, but it's.
No,
Wow. Okay.
it's a fully squished and plasticine based image that's done on on a
Okay.
flatboard canvas, and
Okay.
so yeah, so just as an example
And
of what.
that's a gorgeous work of art. I was thinking it was just going to be like these smudges. Oh, I love that.
Sometimes you can do smudges. That one's mine because ethically I can't show other people's art on in a public
Of
setting.
course.
So I
Yeah.
do have examples of the kind of art and things that I make, just so that you can see and just have a get a feel for what it is that I do.
Oh my God, I love that. And does that prompt discussion, or how does that work? Like, so you had talked about the gentleman with the rabbit,
Yep.
and the rock, because then that probably talked about where the rock was going to go, how it was going to be used, how they were, going to honor the memory of their pet, that sort of thing. Is that part of the creation of it, what you know creates that dialogue?
Absolutely. I mean, there are some people who, who do want to process the actual artwork and that we can get into, that some people will be processing while they're creating. Other people will create and then they'll process afterwards with the art therapist and the counselor in order to be able to, get a better understanding of what the image or what the creation was about. This one was very, very direct. The stone was, was made as a memorial of the for the rabbit. So that one was pretty apparent, but it did allow the young man to be able to express his feelings, which until that point he had been very concerned. He was not wanting to bury the rabbit, so he was holding on to the rabbit in the house, and Mom was like, how are we going to do this? And I said, well, let's create a ceremony and we can use the art making and the stone as a way to be able to create the experience of ceremony. And once we do that, it'll allow him the permission to be able to say goodbye to the body part of his rabbit. So I often have to be very creative in my process to try and help
Wow.
people who are stuck, whether they're children or they're adults. If they're feeling stuck, whether it's creatively stuck. Sometimes it's not just grief and loss or traumas that I'm dealing with. I've got people, sometimes who are having difficulty with time management or trying to get things done. I work with a lot of teenagers now, and so I find that's one of the biggest challenges I find with young with adolescents and new university students is their time management skills, and that they've been brought up in a time in our lives where they really don't know how to sometimes turn off their screens and be able to move over to the work that needs to get done.
Wow, cool, and that's a great segue into another project that you were telling me about, the 40-minute club.
42-minute club,
42
yes.
minutes. See, I already shaved the 2 minutes off.
We need those 2 minutes, Mark. You can't get
Okay.
rid of those 2 minutes.
So what's the 42-minute club?
Oh my gosh, this is the best story, I have to say. I love telling this one. Okay, so I mean, we all know that. Okay, so I'm an empty nester recently, and so what ended up happening is that last year, after my son left for university, his first year, I found myself, feeling a bit sad and blue, as a mom would do when your only child is off to university. And one of the things I found myself doing was falling deep into streaming, into some of the television streaming mechanisms. And I started watching a show on one of these streaming platforms, and I watched the show and I kept watching the show, and I'd go to work and I'd come home and I found myself, basically losing all my time while I was doing this. Well, at the end of 4 weeks of this, I watched 93 episodes, I think, in 4 weeks.
Oh, wow, that's
Yeah.
that's a lot.
It's a lot, but I mean, what's interesting though, Mark, is the more research I'm doing, because I'm doing case studies right now of different people who are experiencing different time loss situations, and when you start actually asking people and getting them to be truly honest, the amount of time people are spending on streaming platforms and binge watching television programs or TikTok or any of these, some of these other platforms, the time people are losing is tremendous. So I started isolating out and I sat down. I thought, well, what is it that happened for me during this process? So in breaking it down, I worked out that each episode was approximately 42 minutes, and so just enough time for your brain to be engaged in excitement or whatever, and then to release, and then you gauge. So it was as if it was just this constant, this constant feeding into our the psychology of it. And I thought, okay, but if you're watching a television show, it's actually an hour long, which means that there's 18 minutes of this other timeline. So I started creating this philosophy of what does a 42-minute hour look like? So what if I took 42 minutes of an hour and dedicated it, took my phone, timed the 42 minutes out, and made a specific choice about what it is that I wanted to create or do in those 42 minutes. And then in those remaining 18 minutes, which I timed also, you get up, you go to the bathroom, you throw the laundry in. So you actually dedicate your 18 minutes for all the other life things, so that when you go back to a next cycle of the 42-minute hour and you have those 42 minutes, you can focus and actually accomplish, something really specific.
It sounds an awful lot like the strategy that you use for writing sprints.
It's very similar. The difference in writing sprints that I've seen, because I have done some writing sprints myself, is that oftentimes they don't talk about taking that time in between of being
Right.
able then to take care of all the other business that needs to get done, or that you just need to take a break and walk around and get your brain, just move your legs and all those kind of things. So one of the pieces that I've started to work with, I'm working with a few corporate people that I'm working with on how to incorporate these concepts into their corporate life. A few writers who are just chomping at the bit, and being able to integrate it into even like a mother schedule. Like I've got one mom who started to use it in order to be able to get some things done around the house, instead of feeling like she is been just falling when she's super tired, falling down and watching two or three shows, and then falling into this binge watching. And then when people ask, right, they're like, oh, did you get this done? And how often do we all say, oh no, I didn't have time? And so part of my goal is to be able to remove the concept of time shaming somebody, so that
Right.
people can actually be really like hold on to and hold themselves accountable and feel proud of themselves for what they're able to get done. And if it's just that you can only get one 42-minute hour in, well, imagine if you were able to do five 42-minute hours in a week. How much writing could you get done? How much, how much gardening, if gardening was that you wanted done, or your goal of learning a new recipe, right? So
Right. Right.
really, it's a very universal concept. So
I love that. I love the sort of people are always like, well, I don't have time for it, but this is a time recovery plan so that
yeah,
people can find the time that exists that we don't realize is just sifting away in
yeah.
in those small increments. I love that. That is fun. Then is that going to be a book? Is it a course? How is that going to be coming out?
So it's coming out. I'm working on the book right now, but I am offering I offer time mentoring coaching sessions. The 42-minute club is a public Facebook group that if you wanted to
Oh,
join, you can
cool.
join my 42-minute club.
And you'll
Um,
send me a link. I can include that in
I
the
will
show notes.
send you a
Awesome.
link, absolutely. And we talk about time recovery, and I also encourage people, like to share their 42-minute hour, and to see, what that's like for them. So our community is growing, and so I always invite people to come and join that group and share their thoughts. And eventually, my goal is to, I mean, I would love to be able to have like a 42-minute hour app, that I'm that I work on. But for now, it's the 42-minute club on Facebook. I offer the time mentoring, and then also I'm working on the book. And my other side piece is that, I mean, I love speaking about time. I truly believe that the more we are able to be accountable for our time, that we can all do amazing things in our life. So I'm really excited about a few different speaking opportunities like this, and I did a speech this summer for one of the provincial associations, counseling associations, and that was very exciting just to hear how people got really excited about the idea, and so I'm just looking forward to growing that and speaking to more people, professionally and out in the corporate world, and just bringing my smiley, sparkly self to the world.
I love that. As you were explaining that principle, I was thinking of the concept of, we use such a small percentage of our brain.
Yeah,
And it feels like, and we use such a small percentage of our actual time usefully, or in ways, and we don't realize that. So it's almost like you're the people who help you focus in on leveraging those things you already have. Everyone has the same 24 hours. It's not like I know we're in different time zones, but it's not like I
yeah,
have a different 24 hours than you.
yeah.
It's I may just be watching more cat videos on TikTok or something. So,
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with cat videos. I just
no,
want to
not at
say.
all. I just
So
have to fit them in properly.
yeah. Well, and that's a really, really important part, Mark, is that when I say to somebody, I'm not saying, don't watch your shows, don't watch the cat videos, it's that make a decision that if you want to watch a movie, then say I want to watch a movie instead of like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, I'm just going to sit and watch a movie, and then saying, oh my God, I spent my whole night, and I wasted my time. It's like, no, it's like, oh, I watched a movie. Was it good? Was it bad? Doesn't matter. I made the decision because it allows yourself, and I talk about, moving time shaming ourselves so that we can then be able to, just accept what we've chosen, be accountable, and then move on to the next thing in our day. So,
I love that because it's not that I just fell into this pattern without consciously being aware of it. As I purposefully said, I'm going to do this.
yes.
And I'm going to enjoy it while I'm doing it, and then I'm going to do something else, rather than feeling embarrassed. You know what? I need to relax. I'm going to watch some cat videos on TikTok,
Yeah.
or whatever it is. But I'm purposefully doing it, not going, oh, I just need an endorphin rush by pushing a button.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, 100%, and I truly believe that, and it isn't so much that I'm asking people, drink the Kool-Aid, do this every day, because that's not what this is about,
right.
I truly believe that we all need to have different tools and techniques in our basket. There is no one technique that any one of us should be using all the time, every single day. I'll leave that, to some of the other people I see on the internet who are trying to sell that one methodology, and that's not what it is. It's, can this tool help you when you need to focus and get something done?
I
This
love
is
that.
that's solely what I want to be able to offer people, and just that excitement that that you have the possibility. So I ask you, Mark, I'm going to ask you a question. If
Turn the tables.
yeah, so small goal, big goal. Is there one thing that you've been really, really trying to get done, but you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't have time?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I've got a lot of them, but yeah, I do. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so maybe off books, I will walk you through, and I'll walk you through one of those goals and how the process works and how we can actually like I go
Okay.
through the actual steps, and I'm happy to do that if you're interested.
Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, I would even record this for my patrons as well, just so they can benefit from watching me go through the process. So that would
Sure,
be,
that would be that,
awesome. I
that would
was
be
going to
great.
ask you one quick last question before we get close to the end, and
Sure.
it was sort of a, for writer's block, which, I'm wondering if there's something in that basket of all the creative possibilities of when somebody is stuck, when they're not sure where to go with the manuscript.
Yeah.
Maya's next adventure, you're at a scene in that mid-novel slump where you're like, oh no, what do I do at this point? Are there ways that leveraging a different kind of creativity, whether it's painting or sculpting, is that a way to sort of to have it come out some other way? Is that something that you've seen or ever worked with writers in that regard?
Yes, so I mean, one of the things that I suggest, and I always lead by example. That's how I've lived my whole life, is leading by example. And so one of the things that I often do if somebody is feeling, stuck in their writing piece, is that I introduce, different ways for them to use art. And so one of the pieces I do, like watercolor, is one of the best ways if you get a high pigment paint, and some watercolor paper, and that before, if I sit down and I'm stuck or something like that, I'll get out the paint and I'll get out the paper and I'll do some colors, right? And so that with the movement, you're actually getting yourself. So I have my book near me, my computer, I have my painting with me, and I'll paint and I'll get the colors out. And really, what I encourage people, it isn't about painting the most beautiful painting. It's about color and shape. And so if you can just use a series of color and shape and like water onto that page, it allows you to have that movement. The other piece that I really encourage for people to do, and I have is to find going out in nature. Working out in the garden is one of the most awesome ways to be able to help improve your health. You can, and also to be able to really remove those blocks. I do a lot of succulent propagation in my I do a lot of things.
Title for a book, doesn't it?
Yeah, that could be one. Yes. So I do a lot of so for anyone out there, succulents are also chicks and hens. So they're a type of a different kind of a cactus, kind of in the cactus family, kind of, for anyone. And they're so much fun because I propagate them, and then I am always cleaning them up. So if I need some fresh air, I'll go outside and get my head clear. So
Awesome.
And the vegetable gardens and all that kind of stuff. So
again, healthy all the way around.
Yeah.
Excellent. Michelle, thank you so much. This was so inspiring. Can you please let my listeners know where they can find you online?
Absolutely. So you can find me on my website at michelleoucharek-deo.com, and Mark will write that down so I know it's a bit of a mouthful. Also, if you're wanting to pick up my books, they're available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and so the series is Wine, Love, and Friendship, and the first book is The Girl in the Peach Tree, second is Barefoot in the Dirt, and the new book that's coming is Untangled Vines. And so just make sure you have a little Kleenex in your pocket, because sometimes it gets people a little going. So
Awesome. Michelle, thanks again for hanging out with me today.
Thank you so much, Mark. It was my pleasure.
So I'm really fascinated by my loss of time. I can have all of this time. And this goes back to exactly why working 20 hours per week for Draft to Digital was perfect for me, because before I was committing 20 hours a week for a job, I had all the free time. And because I had all the free time, I got nothing done. I need to squeeze down my time and say, you only have an hour. I need to get stuff done. And so today I only had 2 short meetings, very, very short. And therefore I didn't really have a lot on my plate today. I didn't have to do the D2D live. So that freed up another hour out of my day. And with that extra time, I threw it in the garbage. So I have an issue with that. And as I mentioned in prior to the interview, and I know you'll just listen to the interview, you understand that Michelle has generously offered to do a little session with me to sort of demonstrate how she can help even somebody like me who's very deadline driven. I'm a deadline driven person. I love to have my deadlines. That's why co-authoring is great, because when I know someone else is depending upon me, I work harder for it. But when it's just me, I kind of let it go. And I mean, you guys, right? This podcast, I have not missed in 5 years a single Friday of this podcast, no matter what's been going on. The episodes may have been a little bit shorter. I may have abbreviated some things, but I did not ever not give you a podcast. So it's that commitment to others that's really important for me. Anyways, that's one of the things that I wanted to reflect on is just that, understanding that and it comes back to this, and I really want to say this. We all have the same time. We all are gifted. We are blessed with 24 hours in a day. My 24 hours and your 24 hours are the exact same. Sometimes we use those hours positively. Sometimes we don't. And it's not the end of the world if you chill and relax and take some time, because that mental health, that break is really, really important. But what I'm saying is, when it's time to work, are you actually working in? So I'm really curious about this 42-minute club. There will be a link to it in the show notes over at starkreflections.ca, and it's a relatively small group, so you're not going to be overwhelmed with like 50,000 people or something like that. It's a smaller group, so probably some benefit for you if you're interested in checking that out. But I love that idea of that found time, and curious to see what Michelle does with that, and of course the book on top of her fiction books, but that book that's coming out on that topic. The second thing I wanted to reflect on was a really important point that Michelle said, and I just want to highlight this because I think this is important, because she talks about, there's the different therapies, right? There's the different types of creative therapy and art therapy and gardening therapy, musical therapy, if you remember episode 273 with Jennifer Buchanan, who incidentally is good friends with Michelle. That is how I met Michelle. It was through Jennifer. So the tools that we can use, there's different tools, and Michelle talked about having our own tools in our own baskets. And even above that, above just our own tools versus like your unique tools versus the tools I use may be different, because my hammer's weighted better for my hand and your hammer's weighted for your hand, or maybe you're more of a screwdriver person rather than someone like me who just likes to hammer on things, or it doesn't matter, whatever, different kinds of tools. But even more importantly is the right tool at the right time. Now it's time to use a hammer. Now it's time to use a drill. Now it's time to use a saw, right? So using the wrong tool at the wrong time is just as detrimental as not having the right tools in your basket. So again, that's why, we listen to podcasts, we read articles, we interact with other authors, we engage, we learn, but we always have to readapt everything we're absorbing into our own worlds. We have to readapt them into our own tool sets. And at different times, there may be things that you hear about that are neat. So, for example, I talk about Findaway Voices and audiobooks a lot. If you're not ready for audiobooks, if that's not something that's in your wheelhouse right now, that's okay. That's fine. I'm just sharing that information with you should that become useful for you later on down the road. But you don't have to worry about not doing it now, because we spend so much time thinking about the things we're not doing. And I was doing it, right? In this episode, I'm beating myself up for the things I didn't get done, as opposed to acknowledging the stuff I did get done. I got a podcast episode done this week, huh? Not bad, huh? But I think remembering the differences of those tools and the differences of the right timing for the right tools. And that's such an important thing. So I want to thank Michelle for an inspiring conversation. I want to thank you, dear listener, for listening to this episode. If you have any of your own reflections, your own thoughts, you can always leave your thoughts and comments over at starkreflections.ca. You can @ me on Twitter. I'm at Mark Leslie. If you want to support the podcast, you can leave a review for the podcast on wherever you're listening to podcasts, or better yet, just share this podcast with someone that you think would find value in these Stark Reflections, in these 274 episodes of the Stark Reflections podcast. But again, just like those tools, you don't have to listen to every single one. You can kind of pick and choose the ones that you think would be beneficial for you. So thanks again for listening to the podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. And until next week and next episode, here's wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com. What if they mixed Grease with the Monster Mash?
They did the Monster Mash. It was a graveyard smash. It caught on in flash.
They killed the man.
The Monster Mash.